fine. Right, well, I'll declare the meeting open at 2 minutes past 3, and welcome everybody to the meeting today. The first one for all the new councillors elect, and welcome to everybody else that's been part of the team for a wee while now. And before we proceed any further, we'll ask James to do the karakia for us, please.
Kia ora tātou. He karakia tīmutanga. Inoi tātou. Kia whakarori a tēti atua rana rawa. Kia muagaroko i te whenua. Kia whakaro pai ki te tangata. E te atua, manaki tea arehe no mātou o tēnei rā. Āwhani te a mātou mahi. Help us here today to make wise decisions for all concerned. Lord, te rangatira te kaha me te kororia, ake, amen.
Amen. Well done. Thank you, James. And also with that too, I must welcome any members of the public that are watching through the Zoom. So we have no apologies for the meeting, so we will move on to the declarations of interest. Now the interest register is on Microsoft Teams, so if anybody has anything they would like to update on that, it's available there. At this stage we've had no changes notified to us. From there we'll move on to item 4, urgent items not on the agenda, to which so we'll move straight on through to item 5 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting held 5th of April of this year. Now, as some of us weren't there, we are receiving the minutes only. So if I can, somebody please move and second these letters. Thanks, Barry. Thanks, James. Result of the minutes from the extraordinary meeting 5th of April to be received and accepted. All in favour? Aye. Carried. Thank you. So from there we'll move on to proposed terms of reference to be adopted, and Simon will take us through that, please.
Yes, so thank you, Your Worship, and congratulations, councillors, for joining this committee, and Pauline for joining from the West representative. So we have a full quorum again in terms of delegates. The terms of reference has been updated accordingly. The only other change to the previous terms of reference is the reporting line of this committee. It goes directly to full council. We don't have a capital projects and tenders committee anymore. So the report will be directly to council. And there has been a request from council for an update on the status of the project. We plan to have that for February council meeting, which will be represented by Stan Tekin, taking the lead on that. Happy to take any further questions.
No questions for Simon? Sure everybody's been through the terms of reference. Everybody's happy with those. So can I have a mover and a seconder that we accept that? Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Emma. And that's the adoption of the proposed terms of reference for the Hokitika Wastewater Treatment Plant Project Oversight Committee. All in favour of that being accepted and adopted? Against? Carried. Thank you very much. So from there we'll hand over to John for the update briefing for the committee. Thank you, John. You're going to have continuity of badges, right?
I think it'll be fine. I've got it all memorised.
Very well done.
Is anybody joining us online?
We don't know if there's any public viewing this, do we?
It's only the public, no other committee members, James.
My name is John Strange, for those who, I think everyone does know me, from Stanley for Grangemouth Office, civil engineer. In your meeting package that was sent out by Susie, there was a summary, and I'll sort of talk through that to start with, to give backstory to the project and the involvement that this committee has had in the other facets. And then there were some documents appended to that. And so we just talked to those. They were sort of to give a window into the very initiation of the project and the bringing about of this committee, and then some outputs from the work that the Oversight Subcommittee and the working group that sits underneath that engine room has generated. Feel free to ask questions at any point. And yeah, this will be new to Pauline and for council reps, but the other three iwi reps, James, Emma and Barry, have been involved intimately from day one, both on this committee and the governance role, and then underneath that is the iwi representatives for the project working group. So we've got this governance group with equal members, and then underneath that project working group being same for reps and council staff, being Scott and his team, Simon, and then at times we've brought in stakeholders, the West Coast Regional Council, Conservation, Community Public Health. So that's kind of a bit of an overview. So early on, and councils starting to turn the wheels. There was a review of the submissions to the annual planning process. There was a couple of iterations there of considering options, and from that, we was held at the other side to present a proposed pathway forward. And in that package that I emailed out, or Susie emailed out, it was the sort of background and project objective agenda for that, plus there was a business case type pathway for the project, and that was setting out the process of establishing objectives at the front, developing options, assessment of options, through to consenting processes, etc., etc. So that's all there in what we've sent. The conversation that I resulted in support for that process, and that was where the formation of this governance group, being 4 reps from council, 4 from iwi, was put forward and agreed, and then this is where things have developed from there. And I think that set a nice way to kick off. Now, from there, we've had a number of workshops where we, with the project working group, it's the council staff reps, where the project outcome statement was worked through, the process we're going to work on, who the partners, stakeholders would be, and then that was brought back to the Oversight Subcommittee for conversation and endorsement, and that's been the process that's occurred on the way through. We also identified in a workshop in September, so September 2021, problems and benefits of investment, again endorsed by the Oversight Subcommittee. Technical elements of the project were defined later that year, being scope, risks, constraints, dependencies. And then from that, this document here, a draft business case was prepared. So that becomes a very good summation of the work that came to that point in November 2021. So that's, you may or may not have flipped through that or had a read, but it's a really good kind of document to get your head around things. And becomes a good reference document going forward, because that is an output from the working group. And yeah, so that sets out purpose, background, strategic context, the case for investment, any existing things that are in place and needs, scope and technical requirements, benefits, risks, and dependencies. From there, we moved into the options development phase, and had a workshop here where we went through potential options. So that's the generating a very long list of options. And that included locations for a plant, locations for discharge, methods of treatment, storage, capacity requirements, funding, and technology. They're all inputs to that. At a similar time, sort of at the time that this was generated, November 2021, we commenced some discussion with Silverfern Farms because they're a very large contributor, and their discharge, whether it's measured by volume or by strength, is in 30 to 40 to 50% of what council zone domestic is. So it is a significant contributor. The original plant was built back in 1970 to service the town, the hospital, and the meatworks. So it was part of the original scope of that plant back then. So look at the old design drawings. So it's not like they've come on since then. So the conversations with them started with a conversation just to say this is what's happening, because they'll see things in the paper that everyone else here sees. So they knew that there was some consideration. And we, with council, shared what our general process was going to be, i.e. the process that we'd put in front of locally, we discussed and agreed to do. The work we'd already done, which was gathering sort of baseline information and how the project was going to be run and what our goals were. And that included risks. And so the conversation they had back was that they're the very same things that they'd started thinking about knowing this was happening. So there's been a number of conversations, including with Scott and Simon attending. And yeah, so they're in the background looking at their own system and considering how they can become more efficient, reduce their outputs, because they're aware that they are going to be options include their flows coming in as we currently do in a reduced status, or them, in the long list of options that includes them not coming at all. So we were quite open that they are the long list of options, but certainly not one that they expect to want to do. We then, with our long list of options, carried out what's called a fatal flaw assessment of elements of the scheme. I'll talk about elements. We think of locations, discharge locations, each of those different elements. We did a fatal flaw on those with the working group. And one of those other documents that was sent out to you was the options assessment framework. So figured that providing that to you for today, for pre-reading or post-reading, gives you kind of an insight into how the assessments were going to be done, agreed to be done. And again, that was put in front of the Oversight Subcommittee for their consideration and endorsement back then. So the fatal flaw assessment rolled a bunch of elements out, and then we compiled the remaining elements together to create potential schemes. And then we've done a round of what we call traffic light assessments, scoring green, orange, red, based on how each of those schemes scored against a set of criteria. And the criteria were based on project objectives, 4 well-beings under the Local Government Act, and a couple of other measures that relate to the business case and or consenting elements that will come at a later date. So again, all that's in here for getting your head around. We also had a site visit to the Greymouth Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is built in 8 years ago or so. And it's a tripling filter type system. That is one of the options that has been considered in the long list.
Just what the new members need to know, the size of the one we require compared to the one agreement.
smaller.
they're
Yeah.
half the size.
So we had a visit there, which was a good field visit. One of our principal process engineers who was involved in the formation of Greymouth system, or the system prior to that, came down for that. So it may be that at a later date, some members here who haven't seen or been may wish to have a look at that as well.
That's worth saying.
So we've got to, as a project working group, we are almost completed the traffic light assessment of this long list of schemes. And we've just prior to the council term finishing, there'd been a wee loop of getting input from mana whenua on potential enhancements, cultural enhancements or other, to the systems before we do the final scoring and identify. The goal for that process was to identify a shortlist of 3 to 6 or something schemes to then put to this committee for consideration and endorsement, and then on the basis that that is endorsed, they would go through for detailed investigation. So that's potentially a 12, as I've noted in here, potentially a 12 months of investigation to have a full season for ground conditions, etc. And then from that, as this is in the next steps, with the results of those detailed investigations, that allows another multi-criteria analysis of those shortlist item schemes to then identify potentially a preferred option. I guess as an overview, one of the good aspects around the process, if it sounds like it's a very detailed process and thorough, then it's probably because it is. All parties in this room, or iwi reps, along with council staff and other stakeholders, have been involved from day one. So there's no surprises for this group as we go forwards. That's the goal. Any questions?
Yeah, did you have a gut feeling about which way it would end up going right from the start? And have you looked at that option yet?
I think everyone probably has, based on whatever their background is, are you asking me as an individual or me as the working group? Or
You as an individual to start with.
maybe, but there's a wide range of views from within the community and within the working group. So it's really good to have your own thoughts tested, and it's good to have so many inputs. And the nice thing about the process that's being followed is that right from the outset, it's about what are the problems of the current system, what are the problems with concerns about other ways of doing things, and then what are the options for going forward. And it's not about what is the scheme, it was about the components, and then it becomes a smorgasbord or a pick and mix. And so the long list is very long. It's like 150 or 60 potential schemes, because by the time you take one location, and the way we approached location is start where the current flows will go to, and then, because that's the most logical to start with, and then move quietly away from that. We moved, the way we referred to locations was existing site, and then east of the highway, which is west of the airport, east of the airport, Blue Spur, Canary Ponds type zone, and then south side. And so that's the locations. And then for discharge, we started with that very long list prior to the fatal floors with river as the discharge location. So very simple: river, land, groundwater, ocean, and then within river there was 2 rivers, and then ruled out. So with our group, fatal floored elements of that. So river went out straight away. And so that's all there as part of the background to where we are now. So it's easy for the likes of yourselves or others, and at the right time, community to be able to see back and see that path. Yeah. Short answer, no. Other than, that's right, I had forgotten the question. Other than Greymouth has a biological tripping filter, a BTF system, that does work well, is low energy, very simple, was endorsed by local iwi there at that time, which is some time ago, and has a good track record elsewhere. So certainly one of the options, and it's in there in the list of options that is being considered.
It's an agreed to.
What's that?
I said, I think it's agreeing to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. 2 toes for you. Any other questions?
There you go.
Perfect.
What about the Greymouth system?
Right in the middle, and
Opposite the garden.
Where about the nurseries are,
yeah,
Yeah, so you turn off to go into Laketown.
across the road.
it's got the concrete walled aluminium geodesic dome roof.
PCI's next door.
And did they go through a similar process? Or did they go through a similar process, do you know, before they processed?
They did. They had an early process with community consultation and stakeholders, partners. And then in Greymouth, they had a 2-stage process because they didn't have a separated network. Initial consenting requirements from the Environment Court was to put something at stage 1 in first. So there was a fairly simple process put in place at the pipe ends to give time to get the network in.
So separated, is that just
Yeah, so council there didn't have a separated system, whereas this has been separated for 50 years. So there was a requirement to make improvements immediately by putting simple treatment on the end of pipes, and then 10 or so years later put the proper plant in. And it was at the time of the doing a literature review for the plant, some number of years later, that the option, the Hastings type option that the Greymouth one follows, was a recently new arrival in terms of how the system was put together. And at that time, those options were presented to local levy and for their partner involvement.
You went to drive past, it's not an eyesore.
No.
And theirs is right on the side of the road, so ours is further back on one side.
I remember too, Barry, when they were going through that process, there was quite a bit of angst in the Greymouth community about it because they didn't understand what it was going to look like, what the impacts would be, how well it would work, and also too, for some reason they thought it was going to be quite a horrendous smell. And there's nothing, never has been. It's, just quite impressive. Just everything just went like that very quickly once it was up and going.
I think that was the issue for us on the visit, was the lack of odour.
Yes,
You
yes.
were expecting something to hit
Yeah,
the back of your
and there's
throat.
No.
The irony was right in sort of the edge of the CBD, and with the nursery across the road, John, who runs the nursery, was quite concerned because he could see it potentially would destroy his business. and then early on in the construction process. And so a community liaison group, I think that's the term, was required under the Environment Court decision. And so we meet with them on a regular basis through the early phases and then through commissioning and construction. And John was very concerned and then was quite embarrassed at one of the early meetings because someone had rung and complained before the plant even got built to say it was a massive odour and it was a mushroom compost. So to this day, John will turn up at the meetings and I'm really sorry that I know this Curtis will say there's more complaints. I had another load last week. So no, it has been a good success story in that regard.
And what size is the site? About?
Footprint, you mean? Less than the size.
Less than this building, yeah, less than this building.
Yeah. Tank itself 26 metres tall.
John, I think it would be a really good idea to have another revisit. Yeah, I know some been through. I actually missed it as well, so we can arrange for an internal tour just to show councillors what it is.
You've got no idea that's what it is when you go past it, and it doesn't even stand out that you actually draws your attention to it.
Looks like a shed with some vehicles, like a garage, and then a big round thing.
This group, as in the Oversight Subcommittee, wasn't the group that made the visit, it was the working group, so council staff and heavy reps. But yeah, probably it's a good opportunity, and and certainly Curtis and Aaron are very happy and like to show it off. Yeah.
We're very proud of them.
Yeah, because we went down to the discharge point of the river. Yeah, so hopefully that's been a good overview to give you some context to how things kicked off and confidence in the process. And I guess feel free to have conversations with James and Emma and Barry to get their take on things since they've been there since the journey started. There is quite a bit more information. So what I sort of pulled together to be sent prior to this meeting was kind of a couple of the key items. There's lots of other paperwork. There's a package of information relating to the BTF project from Hastings that was provided.
We'll put them in a folder. I think they probably already are in a folder in Teams to make it very accessible for councillors.
Yeah. The summary that was in the email to you here this meeting was a wee summary that I put together for Simon for the council.
These report.
Right, so your report is hopefully, I think that provides quite a good bullet pointed list to sort of see how the chronology of things have developed and then can reference documents from that.
John, are you going to take the council through, or the committee through what's happening next or currently and next?
Yeah, sure. And I did talk to Susanna about, so I've sent her a copy of the, what are we calling it? The base scheme options long list. So we could bring that up just to give you a lens into where we are right now, and then the next step to happen that'll be within the working group, one layer below this. And yeah.
Can I ask a question? When we went to have a look at the when we went to have a look at the grey math scheme, we popped into your offices and there was like a demonstration that was done by one of your colleagues on the science of how it actually works.
Oh, yes.
I didn't know whether there might be some kind of a video that people could click on to have a look at something.
Yeah, there was one that Jim had put up.
Yeah, it just did, because that kind of stuff kind of, oh, that's how it works.
Yeah, we can certainly get a copy of that, or get that, and presumably presenting it's better than just sending it to people, or both.
He was very good at
Yeah.
the way that he presented it, but again, it's that bit around if people can understand the mechanisms behind it, it helps with the understanding of options.
Maybe a Teams call at some point might be a good. And you're thinking within this, the oversight subcommittee?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah,
I mean,
it probably is good to.
Because there's a lot of people in the room that are kind of coming into this a bit cold.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you know, reading papers is okay, but you don't really give what you.
And you've come in at a point where a large amount of work's been done to get 150 list of 150 items down to, I think it's 23 or something in this list, and the goal being to drop this down to 4 or 5 or 6. So at that point, a whole lot of things have been culled out, and we're down on a very short list. So it is a reasonably big step.
And Jim's knowledge and background
Yeah, it's vast.
is world renowned. So
Yeah.
yeah, and he's a little boy from him. So that's really cool. But that background's really necessary for this type of work.
Yes. Yeah, we'll make that happen. Just get my head around this. So I did put in that summary next steps. So next steps for options development being next 3 months, say, and then going forward from that. So right now we have, Susie, can you just scroll it up a touch? We'll just see where the bottom of those rows are. Yeah, there we go. So that was 21 items, yeah, so the green and the red and the orange shouldn't really need much explaining. Green's good. Red not, orange in the middle. So 21 is down at the short list. Short long list. I've got short left, short long left. And we've got these all in here. So receiving environment, ocean, land, west of the airport, land at the airport, east of the airport, and then receiving environment reference. Got things like ocean.
Susie, can you just stop playing around with it?
Just a second.
Sorry, Susie. Got someone unruly in here. So receiving environment and a reference for that, i.e. into trenches in the ground or ribs or the ocean, and then a secondary receiving, there's nothing in those. Location of the wastewater plant, so you can see here we've got one is existing, west of the airport, east of the airport, and then treatment options. And B refers to BTF, or this trickling filter type. C is referring to conventional treatment. And then we did have down here, as an outlier, if you like, ponds. So ponds being similar to what we've currently got, and the location that they're. These other locations didn't. So ponds were culled out as a fatal flaw from those because of neighbouring uses, etc. But on the south side, they were left for the purpose of being evaluated at this level. And then this column G was treatment enhancements, and you can see here we highlighted these. This was our last meeting as a project working group. The feedback loop that we're getting from Mana Whenua via Emma is a loop that we're close to closing out. And then columns that are sitting here as placeholders were related to silver fern farms, and in terms of treatment and in terms of discharge. So that's once we get down to a short list and with them working in parallel on their own things, we'll come together and create a short list that includes the Mana Whenua treatment enhancement desires and silverfern farm components to create a detailed shortlist, I guess. And then you can see through here the criteria. So these are the criteria for this traffic light assessment being so the first one was one of the project objectives, and we haven't scored that yet. So that's a with input from here, it will then close out column 1, which was avoid direct discharge of treated wastewater to natural water body. Number 2 was regulatory standards. So there's this wording around this that's in the business case document. Natural hazards. This is again a project objective relating to the natural hazards in that zone that we're currently in. And then we move to these are the 4 wellbeings: public health, planning, regulatory, constructability. Sorry, the 4 wellbeings at the bottom here: cultural, environment, social, community, and economic development and growth. And then these are key kind of items brought forward from the workshops we had. So that kind of see maybe the trend with the lining up of greens. So I think at the point where this one was saved, we just sort of, for the purpose of discussion, highlighted the ones that had come a bit further forward, albeit not finished, and a block of items that was getting the input from Mana Whenua was these ones here, being west of the airport, and east of the airport. So you can probably see, and maybe in your own mind,
Why was it only those sites that would be
it was seen that the south side, you can see it scores pretty poorly for these components. It's a long way away.
so just
And then we
Across
have-
the river.
Yes, across
the river.
There's issues there. And then for the existing, there's similar other issues.
We've always had an issue.
So if you squint your eyes and go, you can sort of see more green in this zone, and that was the general basis. In reality, from discussion, some previous discussion with Emma, the kind of items coming from here can be applied to most of those anyway, because it's probably not specific to that item or that location.
Do cost and lifespan of the system get picked up in any of those categories?
Not at this phase, but they do at the next. So cost is specifically in a business case type approach not looked at early on because it could derail the better or the best outcome, if you like. But once we get through to the shortlist and then detailed investigations, give more answers as to risks, and then costs can be put in.
I was just going to point out that the timeline for this is quite interesting in the context of Three Waters. So it starts with us, but it may not finish with us. And the discussions that we've been having with the DIA are very much, this is a project that's highly important. Everybody's put a lot of work into it, it's got a lot of cultural value. This needs to happen, and it needs to be done in a consultative way. DIA have come back and basically said, look, we don't want to kill anything. So they're happy for us to continue, and they want to invest in projects moving forwards. And one of the things I don't think we touched on in the discussion is the resource consent for the existing arrangement ends in 2026. So in reality, you can't stop this project to start again because the timelines won't work. So there have been some preliminary meetings, like I say, with DIA and TU, and as we get nearer as these things progress, we're going to have to bring other people into the tent on this, so that they can then pick up things and move with it.
Just to highlight too that any, I suppose, financial implication with this project, that debt also gets transferred to the new entity. So there's a balancing act between affordability and also going gold plated, knowing that we won't be the future owners of the outfit anyway. They will have a considerable input in terms of the final design once we get to that point, in terms of making sure it's not, I suppose, overinflated in any way.
Yeah, I mean, their expectation is that whatever moves forward is fair and equitable and the kind of thing we would have wanted to have done anyway. What they've suggested to us is that there are other organisations out there who are kind of bigging it up a little bit, for want of a better phrase. So they would expect us to be transparent in the way that we come to our conclusions.
And one of the, I guess, key things that was discussed, the hui marae to start with, was by following a process like this, there is a body of evidence to show the process, and if at any point there's funding opportunities out there, there's good information to be able to provide the business case started. And one of the real risks is getting all the way through and then stumbling at the consenting phase. And there's a number of projects around South Island and elsewhere that are having issues like that. And we don't want that to happen here. Akaroa was one, and just immediately throws everything back. It's time frames and costs and input.
The time frames at the moment, you said, is it 3 months? By the end of the next 3 months, you should have a short list of.
That's the goal. So close out this and then get an endorsed short list.
And then 12 months of looking at those.
Detailed investigations.
That was to sort of really 24.
Yes.
24.
Yep.
And then it all finished by 26.
Yeah, well, I think it's May, is it May 2026? So that's a date, and there's clearly a desire for this process to bring about the right result and bring it about in a timely fashion.
And in 2 years, to once the decision's made about which way to go, 2 years should be enough to implement.
Would expect so. So that, again, by following a robust process with good partner and stakeholder involvement, there's every opportunity to get it right. Yeah.
The key and one major aspect of this is getting the right resource consents across the line. So obviously, whilst we're working with iwi and other stakeholders, there's always the ability for someone to externally challenge what we're doing. I suppose what we want out of this is a consensus from us that this is sense, and also we're trying to alleviate any concerns for any other parties. So bringing them along on the road with us once we've got a design, and talking to them about complications of it. Yeah, I personally think I don't see a lot of pushback myself, mainly because we are going down the long road and evaluating various components of the project to ensure that we actually have, I suppose, discussed it and then come forward in terms of the consensus way forward.
Is there any vision of holding it up by the one district plan?
The one district plan should be an enabler, to tell the truth, because it identifies natural hazards, obviously coastal and all those sorts of things. So it actually helps support our business case, I would suspect, more than anything else. It really depends where the final site is and what that is zoned as well.
And we've already got, as one of our project objectives was this concern around natural hazard. So we're looking at those things to not have that become an obvious stumbling block at the last hurdle.
And the previous council were very brave to set up the committee, the Oversight Committee, because that includes everyone, because of course we can become a really big stumbling block. And we already knew what we wanted, kind of thing. So we want to be sure that we tick all of the boxes, because we do need this and we want it really well done. And we've never been we've never had the opportunity in the past to actually be a part of it. So ticking all the boxes is really important because, yeah, you can't have what's been going on. So they did really good to set up the committee. Yeah, big ups to them.
It was a clear message, I think, too, from Iwi at the time.
It's good.
At that initial point, there were a number of grievances raised, which was a really nice opportunity at that outset. And attending there was Simon, Martin, Ross from council and myself.
Yeah.
So those early processes and was through the process of identifying the early part of the business case, identifying problems and issues, again, was another opportunity for those historic concerns or grievances to come out, which did, and I think a positive feedback loop is to see those captured in the documentation as you go forward, so that they're not just spoken about and then forgotten about, they're actually captured. And everything we do going forward builds on that.
On the positive side, the sites that you've got identified,
Yes.
are they quite specific and are they council owned?
No.
So they're just
So the purposefully not specific. Kind of like a general descriptor based on a geographical, using the airport as a basis, and the river as so almost using the airport as one geographical reference, the river as another. Yeah, simple as that. Because land or opportunity for land and things is a constraint as well.
Would silver ferns have a say on that location?
Well, potentially because they inhabit the zone, part of a zone called Western Airport.
Yeah.
And so that might become a key component. You know, so that's, and we're open about that. We've described how we're thinking on behalf of the council in this group, and yes, that's certainly something that they're aware of as well.
Silver ferns indicated where they would like it?
No. So we've purposefully kept things relatively simple to now, and so allowing this process with the combined group here to come up with a short list of options, and then bring silver fern farms in with that. That answer?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
It's been really good.
Yeah, hopefully it kind of helps.
Yeah.
In many ways, almost hopefully by not having to look at that, you can almost mentally just see the process. We're trying to keep it simple as in geographically and types of discharge. So the options, so that's coming down to, that's the plant location, if you like. And you can see a zoning there being airport on either side. As a general land area. And then for receiving environment, we go to west of the airport. There's something that's sort of got a greenish tinge to that. Options that are in the list currently are Ocean, and O3 refers to Western Milk Products new outfall. So for Ocean, when we first looked at the wide list of receiving environments, for Ocean we had existing outfall. So we need to be, we've made sure for the purpose of consenting that all options are looked at, even if they're not a goer, at least they're on the table and got culled for a very real reason. So existing outfall New Outfall Council and Western Milk Products Outfall. And then 2 of those were culled out, and we're left with O3, which is the Western Milk. And then for Land Western Airport, we've got ribs and trenches. Ribs stands for Rapid Infiltration Basin, which is the discharge method being used in Frank Joseph. So they're the large pits, if you like, or gravel basin that's been formed in the gravels. And there's 6 of those, 5 or 6 down there. And so they're used in a cyclical fashion. And instead of having a discharge or flow into, say, a perforated pipe that's down inside gravels below ground level, this is an open trench that can just go through rapid soakage and can be maintained in the future. So that's the rib. A trench is a perforated pipe in a trench, sort of a conventional, if you like, system. And that's pretty much it. And then we've got out to the south side, we've got an option there called, that's retained down there, called slow rate irrigation. So that's like our drippers that sit on the surface and just quietly let it flows out quite a large area.
And John, we did talk about east of the airport, we could have issues.
Yep.
Yeah, if we go there, we could have real issues.
And you can see that with some of
Museums
the,
or people up there.
you can see that with some of the scoring, and that includes the airport.
Yeah.
There's probably very real reasons why the airport scores poorly in relation to existing land use and concerns about future development and things like that. And you know, we're cognizant of birds and bird striking and all those things, so that's all been part of the process. It's a very easy to read fatal flaw process document. So we'll find Scott and Simon identify a good package of information. Maybe that's the next phase to get you in the door quietly, and then bring some more paperwork to the page.
Just back to what Barry was saying before about building something half the size of Greymouth. Does that allow for future connections like, say, Blue Spur or Cogan's
I asked
Road?
a question, something like, he said that Cogan's Road, Blue Spirit, Waterland will be enough to handle all that. He told me, I asked the question of.
So you can add that in plus future growth.
Yes,
Yes, future growth.
Yep. And
You
even-
just add more
and
silos.
still just half the size of the one Greymouth.
Yeah.
as part of the identifying the scope and extents of the project, the future areas were identified. It's about they'll be part of that.
Yep.
So again, that's all there to able to be looked at and reviewed by the new group to sort of see that that ticks the box of what you're thinking or not. Yeah.
You want
So
to have a hurry. You want to have a hurry.
So if you've got the current numbers coming into it, feeding into it, there's capacity for X amount of additions to come into it over the years.
So that's what's been, summarised in there, what those are. And we haven't got to the detailed design yet, so all of those things are still to be teased out. Even with Silver Fern Farms, the options for what comes out of their plant, they have human waste that's through their ablutions. And that's an easy separation, so that just becomes domestic sewage, same as what comes from town. And then everything else is non-human, which is a key aspect for iwi. And then the different types of flows come from there. They have sort of two waste streams. One being they call it brown waste and green in terms of where it comes, not red, but I think the red is green.
Yeah.
It's tricky. And there's treatment opportunities for them. There's reductions in discharge from them. There's beneficial reuse, and there'll be a range of just like the options that have been worked through here, a range of options, depending on what the preferred option is for the council system, of either bringing pre-treated flows into all of the black box, the system, or bringing it afterwards, or bring part of it in. So there's all those permutations to work through.
And they are doing different things in different locations as well. So that they have done this kind of thing before.
But ideally, it would be nice if they built one beside us, treated theirs and come into ours, because their product is specific.
And that certainly will be one of the options. And as you can imagine, you can put all those options together, and then that has, whether it comes into the council system or if it does come in, then that changes the size of the council system. So there's definitely incentives for them. There'll be a sweet spot. That's the conversation we had with them. There'll be a sweet spot of effort that they put in to reduce their discharges, because there'll be a cost to join the council system.
And so they have to join the council system or set up their own, because they're not able to use if it goes to the outflow, they're not able to use that one.
To clarify that, if the Western Milk Products outfall forms the discharge for council system, Western Milk Products have agreed that council, if they chose, could join that, but only council. So Silver Fern Farms can't go directly as a,
But they could do indirectly.
through council. That way, council, Western Milk are happy to enter an agreement with council if that was the case, because it's about risk management and those things. So there's a number of those plates on those spinning poles, but the project working group has been doing a great job moving through those things, working collaboratively, and we're nearly there with this. And then so there'll be another meeting of that group, and then come back to this group. Yeah.
What's the time frame on that?
So I'd noted there that our thoughts were, in the next 3 months, complete the traffic light assessment, incorporating that mana whenua feedback on the potential treatment enhancements, have a workshop, identify a shortlist, present that to this Oversight Subcommittee, and then commence that detailed investigation. So that's what I see in the next 3 months.
So you get all that completed, so in 3 months' time you'll be looking at that 12-month period.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the 4 bullet points sort of put after that being going forward, we'll do that investigation work, carry out a evaluation of that shortlist based on the new information from those investigations, identify a preferred or recommended option, so it'll be the project working group, and then in parallel carry out what's called a best practicable option. This is an RMA reference. There in parallel to provide an RMA lens on the assessment, and then present to this group again what a progress update and seek endorsement of that option, and then full community consultation. That's the step that we see. So there's been no community consultation to date. I guess the community consultation is happening by osmosis, if you like, through the working group or otherwise. But the intention is to have a well-documented process and then go out of that.
So that'll be sort of mid-2024.
Yeah.
John, just thinking about the process in terms of getting back to full council.
Yeah.
I don't see any point going back to full council until we've got to a short list.
I would expect so, yeah.
Yeah. We've got it scheduled for February, so I think we push it out maybe to April.
Yeah.
I guess that if the council laws that are here think that that's the right way, maybe you can internally have a conversation.
Yeah,
If there was a desire to repeat what we're doing now, then that's all it would be.
I think
By
that,
February, we might have this scored, but it really needs to go in front of the,
yeah,
but I sensed there was a, late last year, sort of at the last minute, we were asked to present to the full council. I think it was a slight misstep in that it should have been presented to this,
to try.
because, yeah, it was almost, it had gone too high.
Yes, yeah.
So I think you're exactly right, John. We need to keep it at committee level to a point where there's enough substance to take it to the council, or else you just don't need.
So I think let's talk, and when you've got to that next level in February, see where you're at with it, and then we'll plan on
Yes,
the following month's meeting or where we go.
because in the interim, that summary that was presented to the group here, that Simon, you were putting that in your report, that probably provides a pretty good sort of status for the for the.
I think they want to see, where we've got to in terms of site selection. Right.
Yeah.
So,
But we can't deliver on that until we've got it, so.
so when are you proposing the next workshop? Have you got a date set?
Well, we need to set one for the project working group. And it is, we try to set the next one while we're all together, because it's less cats to chase. But we know that Wednesdays work really well, so that's been our go-to. And I've had a bit of chat with Pauline about that. So maybe we can organise one. We've got 7 of us here from the working group. We can organise one for, any thoughts? Is it a January or is it a early February, do we think?
Well, are you going to have progress?
And then one after that will be for this committee.
Yeah. So prior to council meeting again.
Yeah. So yes. So when would this committee want to?
I think our next committee meeting is not till March for this committee. I think it's quarterly.
All right, so it's set.
Or was it one? Yeah, so set for March for an update. So we can always do an extraordinary meeting or change the date
To bring to come forward. Yeah. Now I think it might well be a good reason to do that. So we'll try and organise before we leave here today a time for the working group, and then that, if we allowed 2 or 3 weeks after that to close out, then we'd be in a position to then report to the this committee again.
Yep.
Were you looking at something there, Emma?
Oh, I just got my calendar because I knew I had to bring it, that's all.
Nice, well done.
We'll just find a day.
Just don't think we should leave it.
No.
No,
Yeah.
definitely keep the wheels moving.
Because we've also just got the consultation aspect to it, which is delay. Then of course, the consents and notifiable aspects to it, there's potential for future delays too. So I guess the more systematically we move through the process, it's the more we're going to be in a better place to manage any delays.
It was 2 for yes.
The two,
just
yes,
go behind.
definitely, yes.
Was there a date that you thought, Emma?
February 1, 8, 15, you want to do Wednesday?
Yep, I think Wednesday's good.
It's either in January or February, so February. 1, 8 or 15.
Should we try for the 1st of February?
1 February,
What about January?
Yeah.
18.
Sure.
Earliest better.
4,
I think so.
4 January.
January? No, 4 we're on holiday.
We're not, we're never on holiday. The 11th of January or the 18th of January are the Wednesdays.
Any date, set any date. Just
11th?
18th, 11th,
How does that work for staff? 18th, right.
18th,
18th, done.
done.
Nice.
Good day, isn't it?
Yeah.
So talking about an afternoon.
Afternoon, that seems to work well for everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yep, I think that's what we, yep.
in group.
When is, oh yeah, so then, when in March is the Oversight Subcommittee, is there a date set on that already? No.
The Wednesday.
Well, by that date, once we've been through that get together, because we'll have some conversations potentially with them prior to that. Yeah,
Jay.
I presume 2 or 3 weeks after that, would be a good opportunity to meet this group.
Yeah, we can do
Yeah.
that.
So sometime in mid-Feb.
Yeah.
Okay.
The one Wednesday in Feb is Careers Expo.
Sorry.
Wednesday in Feb is the Careers Expo, which I think some of the staff involved.
Oh, so when is it? 15th of February.
Week
I'm
after.
not actually on that one. Oh. So has anybody got any further questions for John regarding the report? Train's gone now. All right, so I'll ask for somebody to move in second. John's report, please be received. Mary, thank you. Jane, thank you. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Following actions implemented from that will be those meeting dates, tentative, and we'll confirm those. This the 15th of Feb at the moment is a little bit of a question from the council's perspective, because we do have a Careers Expo that we are supporting. So we'll come back and confirm on that date. That's all right with everybody. So with that, we will close the meeting at 4:10 and close the Zoom. Thank you very much, Susie.
Thanks, Susie.
And thank you everybody for your attention.